Commander Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the gleaming docking bay of Sanctuary Station, the primary hub of Kythera space. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth standard, but she had grown accustomed to it during her 3 years serving as the human military liaison to their closest galactic allies. The Kythera Greeting Committee waited with their characteristic patience. Their tall, graceful forms moved with an almost liquid elegance, their pale blue skin seeming to glow under the station's soft lighting. Ambassador Veltar approached her first, extending his four-fingered hand in the human gesture he had learned to appreciate. "Commander Chen, welcome back to Sanctuary," Veltar said, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Kythera possessed. "How were your meetings with the Earth Defense Council?" Sarah clasped his hand firmly, noting how his skin felt warm despite its alien appearance. "Productive, Ambassador. Earth has approved the Joint Research Initiative. We'll be sharing our metallurgy advances in exchange for your biomedical technology." Veltar's large, silver eyes brightened with what Sarah had learned to recognize as genuine pleasure. The Kythera were one of the few species in the galaxy who seemed to understand cooperation rather than domination. For 15 years, since first contact, humans and Kythera had built something unprecedented in galactic politics, a true partnership. As they walked through the pristine corridors of Sanctuary Station, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the Kythera's achievements. Their technology focused on healing, growth, and sustainability. Where other species built weapons, the Kythera built hospitals. Where others conquered, the Kythera nurtured. It was this philosophy that had drawn humanity to them in the first place. "The Council grows restless," Veltar mentioned casually as they entered his private chambers, a vast space filled with living gardens and flowing water features. "Chancellor Zekmoth has been making inquiries about our alliance." Sarah's expression hardened slightly. The Galactic Council, dominated by 5 ancient species, had ruled the galaxy for millennia through superior technology and brutal suppression. They tolerated smaller civilizations only as long as they remained useful or harmless. The Human Kythera Alliance had apparently reached the threshold of their attention. "What kind of inquiries?" Sarah asked, settling into a chair designed to accommodate both human and Kythera physiology. "Trade disruptions. Resource allocations. Questions about our joint colonies." Veltar poured a cup of chamak tea, a beverage that had become popular among humans for its calming properties. "Nothing overtly hostile, but the Council doesn't ask idle questions," Sarah finished. She had studied galactic history during her diplomatic training. The Council's pattern was always the same: observe, assess, then act decisively. Species that grew too independent had a tendency to suffer mysterious accidents or economic collapses. Veltar nodded gravely. "Our analysis suggests they view our alliance as potentially destabilizing. 2 species sharing technology and resources freely, without Council oversight, sets a dangerous precedent." Sarah took a sip of her tea, thinking. Humanity had always known this day might come. Earth's position in the galaxy was precarious, young, technologically inferior, and geographically isolated. The alliance with the Kythera provided protection through association with a respected neutral species. But neutrality, it seemed, had its limits. "What does the High Assembly think?" she asked, referring to the Kythera governing body. "They believe we should petition the Council for formal recognition of our alliance. Seek legitimacy through their approval." Veltar's tone suggested his own doubts about this approach. "I fear they misunderstand the nature of Council politics." Sarah understood his concern. The Kythera, despite their advanced civilization, had little experience with military thinking. Their species had evolved on a world with abundant resources and no natural predators. Conflict resolution came naturally to them, but they struggled to comprehend minds that saw cooperation as weakness. "Ambassador, may I speak freely?" Sarah asked, and, at his nod, continued. "Earth has been studying the Council for 15 years. We've analyzed their expansion patterns, their treatment of client species, their response to emerging alliances. They don't recognize partnerships, only hierarchies. To them, every relationship must have a dominant and submissive party." Veltar's skin paled further, a sign of distress among his people. "Then, what do you recommend?" Sarah stood and walked to the viewing portal that overlooked the docking bay. Below, she could see human and Kythera workers collaborating on a new medical transport, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. Children of both species played together in the station's educational centers. This was what the galaxy could become, should become. We prepare, she said simply. Both of our species have something to lose now. The Kithera have shown humans what peaceful coexistence looks like. Humans have shown the Kithera what it means to have true allies who fight for each other rather than themselves. You speak of fighting, but the Kithera have no military tradition, Veltar protested. Our entire philosophy is based on nonviolence. I know, Sarah replied. And that's exactly why humans will fight for you if necessary. You've given us something precious, proof that intelligence and compassion can coexist. We won't let the Council destroy that. Veltar joined her at the viewing portal. The Council commands technologies we cannot match. Their warships number in the thousands. What could humanity possibly do against such power? Sarah smiled grimly. The same thing we've always done when faced with impossible odds. We improvise. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked quietly with her Earth contacts to implement what they called the preparation protocols. To outside observers, it appeared to be nothing more than increased cultural and educational exchanges. Human teachers arrived on Kithera worlds, while Kithera scientists visited Earth facilities. But Sarah knew the truth. Earth was positioning assets. The teachers were often retired military personnel with specialized skills. The science exchanges were mapping Kithera infrastructure and identifying key defensive positions. It wasn't preparation for war, it was preparation for survival. The Kithera, for their part, began to understand that their peaceful nature might not be enough to preserve their way of life. Young Kitherans started asking questions about human history, particularly about Earth's many conflicts and how they had shaped human development. Sarah found herself giving impromptu lectures on military strategy and human psychology to curious Kithera academics. She tried to explain concepts foreign to their experience, the idea that sometimes violence was necessary to preserve peace, that strength could be used to protect rather than conquer, that the willingness to fight could actually prevent conflict. Your species fascinates us, Dr. Nixhal, a prominent Kithera historian, told her during one such session. You have experienced such terrible conflicts, yet you seek peace with genuine desire. How do you reconcile this contradiction? Sarah considered the question carefully. Perhaps it's not a contradiction. Perhaps it's because we've seen the cost of war that we value peace so highly. And perhaps it's because we value peace that we're willing to fight to preserve it. Meanwhile, Chancellor Zekmoth of the Galactic Council was reaching his own conclusions about the Human-Kithera alliance. Reports from his intelligence networks painted a troubling picture, two species sharing technology freely, establishing joint colonies, creating integrated command structures. It was unprecedented and, therefore, dangerous. The Chancellor's own species, the hegemony, had maintained galactic order for 3 millennia through careful balance of power. Client species were kept dependent and isolated, prevented from forming alliances that might challenge Council authority. The Human-Kithera partnership violated every principle of galactic stability. Worse, the humans were proving surprisingly adaptable. Initial assessments had dismissed them as primitive and harmless, but recent observations suggested they were learning and growing at an alarming rate. Their technological development, accelerated by Kithera assistance, was progressing faster than projected. The Chancellor made his decision. The alliance must be dissolved before it became a genuine threat. The Kithera could be preserved, their medical technology was too valuable to destroy, but they needed to understand the cost of defying galactic order. As for the humans, they were expendable. Sarah felt the change before any official announcements were made. Trade routes to human space began experiencing technical difficulties. Diplomatic communications suffered unexplained delays. Kithera merchants reported harassment from Council inspection vessels. It's beginning, she told Veltar during an emergency meeting in his chambers. The Council has made its decision. Perhaps we should reconsider the High Assembly's proposal, Veltar suggested hopefully. A formal petition might still, Ambassador, Sarah interrupted gently, the time for diplomacy has passed. The Council sees our alliance as a threat to their order. They're not going to negotiate with a threat, they're going to eliminate it. Veltar's shoulders sagged. Then, what hope do we have? Our combined fleets number perhaps 300 ships. The Council commands thousands. Numbers aren't everything, Sarah replied. The Council has become complacent. They've ruled through intimidation for so long they've forgotten how to actually fight. They expect submission, not resistance. You're talking about open rebellion, Veltar said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm talking about survival, Sarah corrected. And, sometimes, Ambassador, survival requires fighting for what you believe in. As if summoned by their conversation, an aide rushed into the chamber with urgent news. A council fleet had been spotted in the outer systems, massive dreadnoughts accompanied by support vessels. Their destination appeared to be the joint human Kythera colony on Nexus Prime. Sarah stood immediately. How many ships? 37 capital vessels, Commander, the aide reported. Including the flagship Domination. Veltar looked stricken. Nexus Prime has no military defenses. 50,000 Kythera civilians live there, along with 20,000 humans. Sarah was already moving toward the door. Then, we'd better make sure the Council thinks twice before attacking civilians. Commander, wait, Veltar called after her. What can you possibly do against such force? Sarah paused at the doorway and looked back at him. Something the Council has never seen before. Something they won't expect and won't understand until it's too late. What? Sarah's smile was fierce and determined. Humans who have something to protect. As she left Sanctuary Station aboard the fastest courier ship available, Sarah sent coded messages to every human vessel in Kythera space. The Council thought they were about to demonstrate their power against a helpless colony. They had no idea they were about to encounter something far more dangerous than superior technology or greater numbers. They were about to face human ingenuity motivated by love. The bridge of the Council flagship Domination hummed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Kenthvar reviewed the final approach vectors to Nexus Prime. The massive vessel, stretching over 2 kilometers in length, was a monument to Council power, bristling with quantum cannons, protected by energy shields that could withstand stellar radiation, and crewed by the finest warriors the galaxy could produce. Admiral, reported Commander Yothrim from the tactical station, all fleet elements are in position. Nexus Prime is completely surrounded. Admiral Kenthvar nodded with satisfaction. The operation had proceeded exactly as planned. 37 Council warships now formed an impenetrable sphere around the joint colony, their weapons trained on the orbital platforms and surface installations below. It was a display of overwhelming force designed to eliminate any thoughts of resistance. Any response from the colonial government, the Admiral inquired. Governor Selmeth has requested permission to speak with you directly, came the reply. She claims to represent both the Kythera Colonial Assembly and the Human Settlement Council. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in amusement. The idea that the two species would attempt joint governance was exactly the kind of dangerous thinking the Council needed to eliminate. Put her through. The main viewscreen shimmered to life, revealing a middle-aged Kythera female standing beside a human woman with graying hair. The human appeared calm despite the circumstances, while Governor Selmeth showed obvious signs of stress in her posture and coloration. Admiral Kenthvar, Governor Selmeth began, her voice steady despite her visible anxiety. I protest this unprovoked aggression against a peaceful colony. Nexus Prime has violated no galactic laws. Governor, the Admiral replied with practiced patience, the Council has determined that your illegal alliance poses a threat to galactic stability. You will immediately cease all joint operations, dissolve your shared governmental structure, and submit to Council oversight. The human woman, Director Maria Santos, stepped forward. And, if we refuse? Admiral Kenthvar's expression hardened. Then, you will face the consequences of defying galactic order. I have authorization to use whatever force is necessary to restore stability to this sector. You're threatening genocide against civilians, Director Santos said flatly. 70,000 people live on this world, including 15,000 children. What possible threat could they pose to your mighty council? The Admiral's laugh was cold and mechanical. Your species continues to misunderstand galactic politics, human. This is not about threat assessment, this is about order. The Council has ruled for 3 millennia because we do not permit unauthorized alliances. Your partnership with the Kythera ends today. Governor Selmeth exchanged a worried glance with Director Santos before speaking again. We request time to consult with our respective governments. Such a momentous decision cannot be made hastily. You have 6 standard hours, Admiral Kenthvar declared. At the end of that period, you will announce the dissolution of your alliance and submit to Council authority. Failure to comply will result in immediate military action. The transmission ended, leaving the two leaders staring at a blank screen. Around them, the Colonial Command Center buzzed with nervous activity as staff members tried to process what they had just witnessed. Maria, Governor Selmeth said quietly, "What are we going to do? Our orbital defenses consist of 2 patrol craft and a handful of mining vessels. We can't fight the Council fleet." Director Santos moved to the strategic display, studying the positions of the Council ships. "Maybe we can't fight them, but that doesn't mean we're helpless." "You're not seriously considering resistance?" Dr. Colvin, the colony's chief administrator, interrupted. "This is the Council fleet. They've conquered entire star systems. And they've never faced humans who are protecting their homes," Director Santos replied calmly. "Selmeth, can you get me a secure channel to Commander Chan on Sanctuary Station?" Governor Selmeth nodded and activated the quantum communicator. Minutes later, Sarah Chen's face appeared on a private screen, her expression grim but determined. "Maria, I've been monitoring Council transmissions," Sarah said without preamble. "I'm en route with every human vessel I could gather, but we're still 18 hours out." "Can you hold that long? Against 37 Council warships?" Director Santos shook her head. "Not in a straight fight." "But Admiral Kenthvar made a mistake, he gave us 6 hours to respond. That means he wants our surrender to look voluntary, probably for political reasons." Sarah's eyes narrowed with understanding. "Which means he won't attack during the deadline period. He needs you alive long enough to formally capitulate." "Exactly. And, during those 6 hours, we can implement the preparation protocols." Governor Selmeth looked confused. "What are the preparation protocols?" Director Santos smiled grimly. "Something our species developed during our early space exploration. When you're weak and outnumbered, you don't win through superior firepower, you win by making the enemy's advantages meaningless." Over the next several hours, Nexus Prime transformed from a peaceful colonial settlement into something far more dangerous. Human engineers, many of whom were former military personnel posing as civilian specialists, began implementing contingency plans that had been developed years earlier. The colony's fusion reactors were quietly reconfigured to create massive power surges on command. Industrial replicators were reprogrammed to produce specific materials. The orbital mining platforms, seemingly helpless civilian vessels, began transmitting new operational parameters to their automated systems. Most importantly, every human on the planet began sending personal messages to family and friends throughout human space. The messages appeared to be emotional farewells, but embedded within them were coded instructions that would be relayed to Earth Defense Command within hours. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a human xenobiologist working in the colony's research facilities, made her way to the Kithara Medical Center where she had been collaborating with local doctors for the past 2 years. She found Dr. Nintel, her primary research partner, preparing emergency medical supplies. "Nintel," Dr. Tanaka said quietly, "I need to show you something. Something that might help you understand humans better." The Kithara physician looked up from her work. "Yuki, this is hardly the time for academic discussions." "This isn't academic," Dr. Tanaka replied, activating her personal tablet. "You've asked me many times why humans seem so different from other species you've encountered. Why we form such intense bonds, why we take risks for strangers, why we never seem to accept defeat even when it's logical." On the screen, images appeared of human history: soldiers carrying wounded comrades under fire, firefighters running into burning buildings, ordinary people standing in front of tanks to protect protesters. Each image was accompanied by simple text explaining the context. "You see, Nintel, most species evolved to survive as individuals or as genetic groups. But humans evolved something different. We evolved to survive as chosen families, groups of individuals who may not be related but who choose to protect each other." Dr. Nintel studied the images with growing fascination. "These humans risked their lives for others with no biological connection to them?" "More than that," Dr. Tanaka explained. "They redefined what survival meant. For humans, surviving alone isn't really surviving at all. We only consider ourselves truly alive when we're part of something larger than ourselves." "But why are you showing me this now?" Dr. Tanaka looked directly into her friend's large silver eyes. "Because the Council is about to learn what happens when humans choose to consider an entire species as family." Meanwhile, aboard the Domination, Admiral Kenthvar was growing increasingly confident in his assessment of the situation. Long-range sensors showed no approaching vessels, and the colony below remained quiet. The humans and Kythera were clearly resigned to their fate. Admiral, Commander Yothrim reported, were receiving multiple surrender transmissions from various ships throughout the sector. It appears word of our presence is spreading and causing the desired effect. The Admiral nodded approvingly. Excellent. Nothing maintains order like a proper demonstration of power. Have the messages recorded for distribution to other potential trouble spots. What the Admiral didn't realize was that the surrender transmissions were actually coded military communications. Captain Lisa Park, commanding the human merchant vessel Prosperity, had just informed Earth Defense Command that the Council fleet was completely focused on Nexus Prime and had left their rear approach vectors unguarded. Dr. James Wright, aboard a civilian research ship studying stellar phenomena, had transmitted detailed scanner readings of Council ship configurations and defensive patterns. Professor Anna Kowalski, leading a cultural exchange mission, had provided psychological profiles of Council command personnel based on their negotiation tactics. The Council's intelligence networks were designed to intercept military communications and formal diplomatic channels. They were completely unprepared for intelligence gathering by amateur historians, cultural anthropologists, and research scientists. As the 6-hour deadline approached, Director Santos and Governor Salmeth returned to the command center to face Admiral Kenthvar's final ultimatum. The view screen activated precisely on schedule, revealing the Council Admiral's imposing form. Governor Salmeth, Director Santos, he began formally, the time for decision has arrived. Do you submit to Council authority and dissolve your illegal alliance? Governor Salmeth looked to her human counterpart, who nodded slightly. Admiral Kenthvar, we have consulted with our respective governments and reached a unanimous decision. Good, the Admiral replied, clearly expecting capitulation. Proceed with your announcement. We decline your ultimatum, Director Santos said calmly. Nexus Prime will remain a joint human Kythera colony operating under our shared governmental structure. We reject Council authority over our internal affairs. The Admiral's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief to cold fury. You cannot be serious. You have no military assets capable of resisting even one of my vessels, much less 37. You're absolutely right, Director Santos agreed. We can't fight your ships. But, Admiral, you've made one critical error in your assessment. And, what might that be? Director Santos smiled. You assumed this was about the ships. At that moment, every orbital platform around Nexus Prime activated jamming systems that filled local space with electromagnetic interference. The Council fleet found their long-range sensors blinded and their communications with the rest of the galaxy severed. Simultaneously, the colony's fusion reactors began generating massive power fluctuations that created false sensor readings throughout the system. To the Council fleet, it appeared that dozens of additional ships were decloaking around the planet. But, most importantly, the mining platforms that had seemed so harmless began releasing their cargo holds, millions of tons of metallic ore that they scattered throughout local space using industrial electromagnets. Within minutes, the area around Nexus Prime became a navigation hazard that made high-speed maneuvering impossible for large vessels. What are you doing? Admiral Kenthvar demanded as his fleet struggled to maintain formation in the suddenly chaotic environment. We're evening the odds, Director Santos replied. Your ships are designed for open space combat. They're powerful, but they're not maneuverable. You can't use your superior firepower if you can't get a clear shot, and you can't get a clear shot if you can't maneuver effectively. The Admiral realized the trap too late. His massive warships were now trapped in a debris field that prevented them from utilizing their main advantages. They could still destroy the planet, but doing so would require hours of careful positioning, hours during which they would be vulnerable to exactly the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans specialized in. You've only delayed the inevitable, Admiral Kenthvar snarled. My ships will eventually clear this debris field and, when they do, your world will burn. Maybe, Director Santos acknowledged. But, Admiral, you're still making the same mistake. You're thinking about this like a conventional military engagement. You're planning to destroy our infrastructure, eliminate our defenses, and force our surrender. Obviously. But, that's not how humans fight when we're protecting our families, Director Santos continued. We don't try to win by being stronger. We win by making victory too expensive for our enemies to afford. The Admiral was about to respond when his communications officer interrupted with an urgent report. Sir, we're receiving priority transmissions from Council Command. Long-range sensors have detected multiple human fleets converging on this system from all directions. Admiral Kenthvar felt the first cold touch of doubt. How many ships? Unknown, sir. The jamming is affecting our sensors, but initial estimates suggest several hundred vessels. Director Santos leaned back in her chair. Did you really think the Council could threaten human civilians without every human in the galaxy taking it personally? We told our families and friends what was happening here. They told their families and friends. And now those families and friends are coming to help. The Admiral stared at her in growing comprehension. You're not soldiers. You're civilians calling for rescue. No, Admiral, Director Santos corrected him. We're humans who chose to make the Kithra our family. And we called our family for help. As if to emphasize her point, new transmissions began flooding the Council fleet's communication systems. Hundreds of voices, speaking in human languages from across Earth's many cultures, all carrying the same message: this is our family. Leave them alone. Admiral Kenthvar realized he was no longer facing a simple colonial pacification mission. He was confronting something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire species mobilizing not for conquest or territorial expansion, but purely to protect their chosen family. The Council's 3,000 years of dominance had been built on the assumption that rational beings would always choose survival over principle. They had never encountered a species that redefined survival to include the welfare of others. Prepare for battle, the Admiral ordered grimly. He no longer expected an easy victory, but the Council's prestige was at stake. The galaxy was watching, and any sign of weakness would encourage other species to challenge Council authority. What Admiral Kenthvar didn't yet understand was that this battle had been lost the moment he threatened human civilians. The approaching human fleets weren't coming to win a military victory, they were coming to demonstrate that some things were more important than survival. And that demonstration was about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Captain Elena Rodriguez felt the familiar vibration of her ship's fusion drive as the converted cargo hauler Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, but she could see the tension in their faces. None of them were professional soldiers, yet here they were, racing toward a confrontation with the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison from the sensor station, I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference around Nexus Prime. Long-range scanners are mostly useless, but I'm detecting at least 30 large contacts in orbit. Elena nodded grimly. The Council fleet was exactly where the emergency transmissions had indicated. Any sign of other human vessels? Affirmative, Captain. Multiple contacts converging from all vectors. Looks like the Houston, the Mumbai, the Sao Paulo. Jesus, Elena, it looks like every human ship within 5 jumps heard the call. Elena wasn't surprised. The message had been simple and direct: the Council was threatening Nexus Prime, a joint human Kithara colony with 20,000 human civilians, including children. Within hours, that message had spread throughout human space, carried by merchant vessels, research ships, and private communications. The response had been immediate and unprecedented. Cargo haulers diverted from trade routes. Scientific vessels abandoned their research missions. Even civilian transports carrying families had joined the growing fleet. They came not because Earth Command ordered it, but because no human could ignore a call for help from their own people. Captain Rodriguez, came a transmission from the lead vessel, the heavy cruiser Defiance. This is Admiral Patricia Hayes. All human vessels, please acknowledge and report status. Elena opened the fleet communication channel. Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Indomitable. We're a converted cargo hauler with a crew of 43 volunteers. We're armed with improvised weapon systems and determination. Similar reports came in from across the growing fleet. The cargo ship Mumbai had been retrofitted with military-grade shields by her engineer crew. The research vessel Phoenix carried experimental railgun prototypes. The passenger liner Freedom's Dream had volunteered to serve as a medical ship, her civilian medical staff reinforced by doctors who had dropped everything to join the mission. Admiral, reported Commander Sarah Chen from the courier ship Messenger, I've got updated intelligence from the colony. The locals have successfully disrupted Council fleet operations using improvised countermeasures. They're buying us time, but they can't hold indefinitely. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display, her weathered face grim with concentration. She had commanded Earth's defense forces for 20 years, but she had never faced a situation quite like this. Her fleet consisted of nearly 400 vessels, ranging from military ships to converted civilian craft. The crews included everyone from seasoned officers to volunteer civilians who had never seen combat. Yet as she looked at the determined faces around her, Admiral Hayes felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. This was humanity at its finest, ordinary people rising to extraordinary circumstances not for glory or conquest, but simply because it was the right thing to do. "All vessels, this is Admiral Hayes," she transmitted to the fleet. "I want everyone to understand what we're facing. The Council fleet includes some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Their technology is superior to ours in every measurable way. By conventional military standards, we should retreat immediately." Murmurs of concern rippled through the communication channels, but no one suggested actually retreating. However, the Admiral continued, "We have advantages the Council cannot match. We know this system, we're fighting for our families, and, most importantly, we're not bound by conventional military thinking. We're going to do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds, we're going to improvise." The plan that Admiral Hayes outlined was unlike anything in standard military doctrine. Rather than engaging the Council fleet directly, the human vessels would use the debris field around Nexus Prime to their advantage. Small, maneuverable ships would harass Council vessels while larger ships provided support and coordination. The goal wasn't to destroy the Council fleet, that was impossible, but to make their mission so costly and complicated that they would withdraw voluntarily. Captain Rodriguez found herself assigned to Attack Group Delta, a collection of converted civilian vessels tasked with disrupting Council formation integrity. As she maneuvered the Indomitable through the outer edges of the debris field, she marveled at the sight before her. The Council ships were magnificent and terrifying, massive vessels bristling with weapons, their hulls gleaming with energy shielding. But they were also clumsy in the confined space, struggling to maintain formation while avoiding collisions with floating debris. "Delta Group, this is Rodriguez," she transmitted to her squadron. "Remember, we're not trying to penetrate their shields or armor. We're trying to force them to maneuver defensively, which disrupts their ability to coordinate attacks." The Mumbai acknowledged, followed by 6 other civilian vessels. Each ship had been hastily modified with whatever weapons their crews could improvise: mining lasers, electromagnetic pulse generators, even simple kinetic projectiles launched by cargo handling systems. "Target the lead dreadnought," Rodriguez ordered. "Spread formation, maximum evasion protocols. Make them work for every shot." The converted cargo haulers swept into the debris field like a school of fish attacking a whale. Their weapons were barely powerful enough to register on Council shields, but that wasn't the point. Every shot forced the massive warships to respond, to track multiple targets, to divide their attention. Admiral Kenthvar watched the tactical display with growing frustration. His fleet's overwhelming firepower advantage was meaningless when he couldn't get clear firing solutions. The human vessels moved through the debris field like they belonged there, while his own ships struggled with sensor interference and navigation hazards. "Sir," reported Commander Yathrim, "the human vessels are using some kind of coordinated evasion pattern. Our targeting computers can't establish reliable locks." The Admiral studied the enemy movements more carefully. The human ships weren't just evading randomly, they were covering each other, creating overlapping fields of fire that forced Council vessels to choose between multiple threats. It was sophisticated tactical thinking that suggested extensive planning and preparation. How long have they been preparing for this, he wondered aloud. His question was answered by a new transmission from Director Santos on Nexus Prime. "Admiral Kenthvar, you seemed surprised by our response. Did you really think humans would accept the Council's authority without understanding the cost? You cannot seriously believe you can defeat a Council fleet with cargo ships and mining vessels," the Admiral replied. "Defeat?" Director Santos laughed. "Admiral, we're not trying to defeat you. We're simply demonstrating that threatening human civilians carries consequences." As if to emphasize her point, another wave of human vessels emerged from hyperspace. These were clearly military ships, Earth Defense Force cruisers and destroyers, their hulls bearing the scars of previous battles. But, even more significantly, they were accompanied by ships from human colonies throughout the local sector. Admiral Hayes opened a channel to Admiral Kenthvar directly. "Admiral, this is Rear Admiral Patricia Hayes, Earth Defense Force. I'm here to inform you that you are in violation of the Galactic Non-Aggression Treaty. You are threatening civilian populations without formal declaration of hostilities. The Council's authority supersedes all treaties, Admiral Kenthvar replied coldly. These civilians are engaged in illegal alliance activities that threaten galactic stability. Let me be clear about something, Admiral, Hayes responded. Every human ship in this system is here voluntarily. We're not following orders from Earth Command or responding to a threat against our people. That makes this a humanitarian rescue operation, not a military engagement. The distinction was subtle but important. Under galactic law, military actions required formal authorization and followed specific protocols. Humanitarian operations, however, were considered natural rights that could not be legally restricted. Admiral Kenthvar began to understand the trap he was in. The humans had carefully framed this confrontation to put the Council in the position of aggressors attacking civilians and their rescuers. Any use of overwhelming force would be seen throughout the galaxy as genocide, not law enforcement. Furthermore, Admiral Hayes continued, I should inform you that this entire confrontation is being broadcast live throughout human space and to our Kythera allies. The galaxy is watching your response to civilian refugees requesting protection. On dozens of worlds throughout the local sector, millions of beings watched the drama unfold. The images were compelling, massive council warships surrounding a peaceful colony while hundreds of smaller human vessels raced to the rescue. It was exactly the kind of narrative that the Council had spent millennia trying to avoid. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, still on Nexus Prime, continued her conversation with Dr. Nintel as the battle developed around them. Do you understand now why humans form such strong bonds with other species? The Kythera physician nodded slowly. You see us not as aliens to be studied or resources to be exploited, but as individuals worthy of protection. More than that, Dr. Tanaka explained, watching the tactical displays that showed human vessels maneuvering to protect the colony. You showed us what we could become. The Kythera proved that intelligence doesn't require aggression, that advancement doesn't require domination. You gave us hope for a better galaxy. And now you risk everything to preserve that hope? We risk everything to preserve you, Dr. Tanaka corrected. Because a galaxy without the Kythera would be a darker place for everyone. The battle around Nexus Prime continued for hours, but it wasn't the kind of battle the Council had expected. Human vessels struck and faded, never allowing themselves to be pinned down for the devastating counterattacks that Council doctrine called for. Meanwhile, the debris field continued to expand as mining vessels dumped more material into space, making maneuvering even more difficult for the large Council ships. Captain Rodriguez found herself in close combat with a Council destroyer, her improvised weapons barely scratching the enemy's shields while their return fire lit up space around her. But she wasn't alone. 3 other human vessels coordinated their attacks, forcing the destroyer to divide its attention between multiple targets. Elena, this is the Bangkok, came a transmission from Captain Sato aboard another converted cargo ship. We're going to try something crazy. Can you maintain their attention for another 30 seconds? Define crazy, Rodriguez replied, throwing her ship into a spiraling evasion pattern. We're going to ram them. Rodriguez felt her blood run cold. Kenji, you have 40 people aboard that ship. And they all volunteered for this mission knowing the risks, Captain Sato replied calmly. Elena, that destroyer has been targeting the medical transports. We can't let it break through to the colony ships. Rodriguez understood. The Bangkok had suffered engine damage and couldn't maintain high-speed evasion much longer. Rather than retreat and leave the destroyer free to attack helpless civilian vessels, Captain Sato was choosing to eliminate the threat at the cost of his own ship. Understood, Bangkok. We'll cover your approach. What followed was a display of courage that was broadcast live throughout human space. The Bangkok, engines failing and hull breached in multiple places, accelerated directly toward the Council destroyer. The enemy ship poured fire into the approaching vessel, but Captain Sato held his course with determination born of absolute conviction. At the last moment, the Bangkok's reactor overloaded, turning the cargo ship into a massive kinetic projectile that struck the destroyer amidships. Both vessels disappeared in a brilliant flash of light that was visible from the planet's surface. The effect on the human fleet was immediate and profound. Captain Sato's sacrifice had eliminated one of the most dangerous Council vessels, but, more importantly, it had demonstrated the depth of human commitment to protecting their chosen family. Admiral Kenthvar watched the destruction with growing unease. He had seen many species fight desperately when facing extinction, but he had never encountered beings who would die willingly to protect others with no genetic relationship to them. It was a form of madness that made conventional tactical calculations meaningless. Admiral, Commander Yothrim reported, "We're receiving urgent communications from Council Command. Long-range sensors have detected additional human fleets approaching from the outer sectors. Current estimates suggest over 2,000 vessels converging on this system." The Admiral felt the situation slipping beyond his control. What had begun as a simple demonstration of Council authority was rapidly becoming the largest military confrontation in galactic history. And, unlike previous conflicts, this one was being fought for purely ideological reasons. The humans weren't seeking territory or resources. They weren't even trying to defeat the Council permanently. They were simply demonstrating that some principles were worth dying for, and that demonstration was inspiring other species throughout the galaxy. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Chancellor Zekmoth himself." The Chancellor's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression grave with concern. "Admiral Kentvar, what is your current tactical assessment?" "Chancellor, the human response has exceeded all projections. They appear to be mobilizing their entire civilian fleet in addition to military assets. More significantly, they're fighting with complete disregard for casualties when protecting non-combatants." The Chancellor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Casualties among our forces? Minimal so far, but that's because they're not trying to defeat us militarily. They're creating a political and propaganda victory that undermines Council authority throughout the galaxy." Chancellor Zekmoth understood the implications immediately. The Council's power had always rested on the assumption that resistance was futile. If one species could successfully defy Council authority, others would follow. The entire galactic order could collapse. "Admiral, you have authorization to use whatever force is necessary to end this situation immediately," the Chancellor declared. "The stability of galactic civilization is at stake." Admiral Kentvar nodded grimly. "Understood, Chancellor. Preparing for full-scale assault." But, as he gave the orders to begin planetary bombardment, Admiral Kentvar couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. The humans had forced him into a position where his only choice was genocide or retreat, and the Council never retreated. What the Admiral didn't yet realize was that forcing the choice had been the human strategy all along. They had maneuvered the Council into a position where any victory would be so morally compromised that it would ultimately prove to be a defeat. The real battle for the galaxy's future was just beginning. Deep in the lowest levels of Sanctuary Station, Ambassador Veltar stood before the assembled High Assembly of the Kithara people. The chamber, traditionally a place of calm deliberation and peaceful consensus building, now buzzed with unprecedented tension. For the first time in their recorded history, the Kithara faced a decision that could determine their survival as a species. "Honored Assembly," Veltar began, his musical voice carrying across the circular chamber, "the situation at Nexus Prime has reached a critical juncture. Admiral Kentvar has been authorized by Chancellor Zekmoth to use unlimited force against the colony. Long-range sensors indicate Council reinforcements approaching from 3 sectors." High Councillor Maref, eldest of the Assembly, raised one graceful hand. "Ambassador, we have received similar reports. What we need to understand is the human response. Will they truly risk their entire species for our people on a single world?" Veltar activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber, showing tactical readings from across human space. The image was staggering: thousands of human vessels converging on Nexus Prime from every direction, abandoning their normal activities to respond to the crisis. "The answer, honored Councillor, is yes. They will risk everything." A younger assembly member, Councillor Zendel, leaned forward. "This is unprecedented. In 3,000 years of galactic history, no species has ever mobilized so completely to protect another. What do the humans gain from this sacrifice?" "That is the question we must understand," Veltar replied. "For humans, the concept of family extends beyond genetic relationships. They have chosen to include our people in their definition of family, which means they view threats to us as threats to themselves." High Councillor Maretha's skin showed the pale blue coloration that indicated deep thought among her people. "Ambassador, we face a terrible choice. If we continue our alliance with humanity, the Council will likely destroy us all. If we abandon the alliance, we save ourselves but doom our human friends to face Council wrath alone." There is a third option, Veltar said quietly. We could join them in active resistance. The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the assembly. For generations beyond counting, the Kithara had resolved conflicts through negotiation and compromise. The concept of violent resistance was antithetical to their entire cultural philosophy. Ambassador, Councillor Zendal protested, we have no military tradition. Our people are healers and builders, not warriors. What could we possibly contribute to a military conflict? Veltar touched another control, and the display shifted to show technical specifications. Commander Chen has shared Earth's assessment of Council weaknesses. Their fleets are powerful but inflexible. Their supply lines are extended across vast distances. Most importantly, their authority depends on the assumption that resistance is impossible. You're suggesting we attack Council supply lines? High Councillor Marath asked, clearly struggling with the concept. I'm suggesting we do what we do best, heal and build, but in service of resistance rather than submission, Veltar explained. Our medical technology could save human lives in battle. Our manufacturing capabilities could produce supplies for their fleets. Our knowledge of galactic trade routes could identify Council vulnerabilities. The assembly fell silent as they contemplated this radical departure from their traditional ways. They were a people who had never fired a shot in anger, yet they were being asked to support the first galactic war in 3 millennia. Meanwhile, aboard the Domination, Admiral Kenthvar prepared for what he knew would be the most controversial action of his military career. The orders from Chancellor Zekmoth were clear: end the resistance at Nexus Prime by any means necessary. That meant targeting not just military assets, but the civilian population that the humans were so desperately trying to protect. Admiral, Commander Yothrim reported, all weapon systems are charged and ready. We have clear firing solutions on the primary population centers. Admiral Kenthvar studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the human vessels still fighting desperately to protect the planet below. In 3 decades of military service, he had never faced an enemy quite like this, willing to die not for victory, but simply to bear witness to their principles. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving an urgent transmission from the human fleet commander. Admiral Hayes is requesting to speak with you directly. Put her through, the Admiral ordered, curious about what final appeal the humans might make. Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of hours of combat but her voice steady and calm. Admiral Kenthvar, I'm calling to inform you that all civilian evacuation ships have cleared the immediate combat zone. If you're planning to target population centers, you should know that you'll primarily be killing Kithara civilians. The Admiral's expression hardened. Admiral Hayes, your resistance has accomplished nothing except to delay the inevitable. The Council will restore order to this sector regardless of the cost. I understand that's your perspective, Admiral Hayes replied. But, before you begin planetary bombardment, I want you to understand something about the consequences of your actions. I am not interested in human threats, Admiral Kenthvar stated coldly. This isn't a threat, Admiral. It's an explanation. Admiral Hayes activated her own display, showing real-time communications data. Every ship in my fleet is broadcasting live footage of this engagement to their home worlds. 40 billion humans across 300 colonies are watching this conversation right now. Admiral Kenthvar felt a chill of understanding. You're creating martyrs. We're creating witnesses, Admiral Hayes corrected. When you begin bombing civilian targets, every human in the galaxy will see it happen. And, Admiral, you need to understand something about my species, we have very long memories and we never, ever forget when someone hurts our family. The implications were staggering. If the Council proceeded with planetary bombardment, they would create a permanent enemy of the entire human species. Every human world would see footage of Council ships destroying hospitals, schools, and homes. The political ramifications would echo for generations. You cannot protect these civilians indefinitely, Admiral Kenthvar pointed out. My reinforcements will arrive within hours. Your fleet, no matter how brave, cannot stand against the full might of the Council. Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. Admiral, you're still thinking about this in terms of military victory. Let me ask you something, how many human vessels have tried to escape this system since the fighting began? Admiral Kenthvar checked his tactical displays, searching for the answer. After a moment, he realized the disturbing truth. None. That's right. None. Every human ship that entered this system is still here, still fighting. Do you know why? The Admiral remained silent, but he was beginning to understand the trap he had fallen into. Because we're not here to win, Admiral. We're here to demonstrate that some things are worth dying for. Every human who dies in this system dies knowing that their sacrifice proves human civilians cannot be threatened with impunity. Admiral Kenthvar closed the transmission, his mind racing through the strategic implications. The humans had engineered a scenario where any Council victory would be a political defeat. If he withdrew, the Council would appear weak and encourage further resistance. If he proceeded with bombardment, the Council would appear monstrous and create permanent enemies throughout the galaxy. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent report from the sensor station. Admiral, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout the system. Multiple fleets emerging from jump points. The main display updated to show the new arrivals, and Admiral Kenthvar felt his confidence evaporate completely. The new fleets weren't human, they bore the distinctive energy signatures of Kythera vessels. Hundreds of them, emerging from hyperspace with their distinctive graceful lines and peaceful coloration. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Kythera vessel. It's Ambassador Veltar. Veltar's familiar form appeared on the viewscreen, but something had changed in his demeanor. Where once he had spoken with the gentle diplomacy typical of his people, now his voice carried an edge of determination that Admiral Kenthvar had never heard from a Kythera before. Admiral Kenthvar, Veltar began, I speak for the High Assembly of the Kythera people. We formally reject your ultimatum and declare our full alliance with humanity in resisting Council aggression. Admiral Kenthvar stared in disbelief. Ambassador, your people have no military capability. You cannot seriously intend to engage Council forces in battle. You are correct, Admiral, Veltar acknowledged. We are not warriors. But we are healers, builders, and guardians of life. And we will not stand by while you threaten the beings who chose to call us family. As if to demonstrate their commitment, the Kythera fleet moved into defensive positions around the human vessels, their ships interposing themselves between the Council forces and the planet below. It was a symbolic gesture that would force Admiral Kenthvar to fire through Kythera vessels to reach human targets. Furthermore, Veltar continued, you should be aware that the High Assembly has voted to share all Kythera medical and technological advances with human worlds throughout the galaxy. Our healing centers, our manufacturing capabilities, and our transportation networks are now at humanity's disposal. Admiral Kenthvar realized the catastrophic shift that had just occurred. The Kythera weren't just defending a single colony, they were formally allying their entire civilization with humanity. The technological and medical resources that such an alliance would provide could transform human capabilities within a matter of years. Admiral, Commander Yothrin reported urgently, we're receiving priority communications from throughout the galaxy. Multiple species are requesting clarification of Council policies regarding civilian protection and alliance rights. The Admiral understood immediately. News of the Nexus Prime confrontation was spreading beyond human and Kythera space. Other species were watching to see whether the Council would respect the rights of civilians and allied peoples, or whether they would resort to genocide to maintain control. Chancellor Zekmotha's face appeared on a private channel, his expression grave with concern. Admiral, what is the current situation? Chancellor, the humans and Kythera have succeeded in creating a galactic incident. Any action we take now will have consequences far beyond this single system. The Chancellor's mandibles clicked in agitation. Explain. If we withdraw, we appear weak and encourage other species to form unauthorized alliances. If we proceed with bombardment, we appear monstrous and potentially face rebellion throughout the galaxy. The humans have maneuvered us into a position where we cannot win. There was a long silence as Chancellor Zekmoth contemplated the implications. The Council's authority had always depended on careful balance, appearing powerful enough to discourage resistance while avoiding actions so brutal that they created martyrs and revolutionaries. Your recommendation, Admiral? Admiral Kenthvar studied the tactical display, watching human and Kythera vessels working together with perfect coordination despite their different technologies and capabilities. He had spent his entire career maintaining galactic order through strength and intimidation, but he was beginning to understand that this conflict represented something entirely new. Chancellor, I recommend we reconsider our approach to the Human-Kythera alliance. They have demonstrated capabilities and determination that exceed our initial assessments. You're suggesting we legitimize their resistance? I'm suggesting we recognize that the galaxy may be changing in ways our traditional methods cannot address, Admiral Kenthvar replied carefully. The humans fight not for conquest or resources, but for principles. The Kithara support them not from fear or obligation, but from genuine friendship. These motivations are outside our conventional understanding of political relationships. Chancellor Zekmoth was quiet for several minutes, weighing options that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Council had maintained order for 3 millennia, but that order was based on assumptions that were proving false. Perhaps it was time to consider new approaches. Admiral Kenthvar, the Chancellor finally said, you are authorized to open negotiations with the human and Kithara representatives. Explore the possibility of a formal framework for their alliance that addresses Council concerns about galactic stability. Admiral Kenthvar felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in his military career, he would be seeking peace rather than imposing it. Understood, Chancellor. Beginning diplomatic outreach immediately. As he opened a channel to both Admiral Hayes and Ambassador Veltar, Admiral Kenthvar realized that the humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had forced the Council to choose between genocide and negotiation, and they had made genocide so politically costly that negotiation became the only viable option. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. 6 months after the Nexus Prime crisis, Commander Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the galaxy's newest diplomatic facility. Built through joint human-Kithara cooperation and funded by contributions from 17 different species, the station represented something that had never existed before in galactic history, a neutral ground where alliance relationships could be formalized and protected under galactic law. The station itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering. Human structural design merged seamlessly with Kithara biological systems, while architectural elements from a dozen other species created spaces where beings of vastly different physiologies could interact comfortably. Gardens designed by the peaceful elderly grew alongside meditation chambers inspired by the contemplative Zephyrians. Sarah paused at an observation deck that looked out over the station's central hub, where representatives from across the galaxy conducted the daily business of this new diplomatic order. The sight still amazed her, humans and Kithara working alongside species that had been isolated under Council rule for centuries. Commander Chen, came a familiar musical voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Ambassador Veltar approaching, accompanied by a being she didn't immediately recognize, tall and crystalline, with features that seemed to shift like flowing water. Ambassador, Sarah replied warmly, clasping Veltar's hand in greeting. I didn't expect to see you here today. I wanted to introduce you to someone special, Veltar said, his skin showing the warm golden hue that indicated happiness among his people. Commander Sarah Chen, please meet Resonance of Truth, primary representative of the Harmonic Collective. Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. The Harmonic Collective was one of the oldest species in the galaxy, masters of crystalline technology that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. They had been subjects of the Council for over 2,000 years, their incredible abilities suppressed and controlled. Resonance of Truth, Sarah said, offering the formal bow that her diplomatic training indicated was appropriate for harmonic beings. It's an honor to meet you. The crystalline being responded with a complex harmonic tone that the station's translation systems rendered as, the honor resonates through my being, Commander Chen. Your species has created something that many believed impossible, hope for freedom among the enslaved. Sarah felt a surge of emotion at those words. This was why humans had been willing to risk everything at Nexus Prime, not just to protect their Kithara friends, but to prove that the galaxy could be different. That cooperation could triumph over domination. How many species have joined the Unity Alliance now? Sarah asked Veltar as they walked toward the central conference chambers. 47 have signed formal agreements, Veltar replied. Another 32 have sent observers to evaluate membership. The momentum continues to build. The Unity Alliance had emerged from the negotiations that followed the Nexus Prime crisis. After Admiral Kenthvar's diplomatic overtures, it had taken 3 months of careful discussion to craft a framework that satisfied both the human-Kithara partnership and the Council's need for galactic stability. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Species could form alliances freely, but those alliances had to be registered with the galactic community and subject to dispute resolution through neutral arbitration. The Council retained authority over interstellar commerce and major resource conflicts, but they could no longer prevent species from forming cooperative relationships. Commander, resonance of truth intoned, we must discuss the situation with the Broken Chains movement. Our intelligence suggests Council hardliners are planning a response to our growing influence. Sarah nodded soberly. Not all Council members had accepted the new arrangement gracefully. Admiral Kenthvar and Chancellor Zekmoth had managed to prevent immediate conflict through negotiation, but several Council species viewed the Unity Alliance as a direct threat to their traditional dominance. They entered the main conference chamber, where the daily coordination meeting was already in progress. Admiral Patricia Hayes, now serving as the Alliance's military coordinator, stood before a holographic display showing fleet movements throughout local space. The good news, Admiral Hayes was saying to the assembled representatives, is that Council forces have withdrawn from the disputed border regions. The bad news is that they're consolidating in the core systems, which suggests they're planning something significant. Dr. Maria Santos, who had been promoted to Director of Colonial Affairs after her role in the Nexus Prime Resistance, raised her hand. Patricia, our intelligence sources indicate the Council is developing new military technologies specifically designed to counter human tactical innovations. They've learned from our unconventional approach. Sarah took her seat at the table, noting the diverse group assembled there. Representatives from 47 species, each bringing unique perspectives and capabilities to their shared enterprise. It was chaotic compared to the rigid hierarchy of Council governance, but it was also vibrant with creative energy. The Council's response was predictable, said Dr. Colvan, who now served as the Alliance's strategic planning coordinator. They cannot comprehend cooperation without hierarchy, so they assume we must be planning conquest. Ambassador Veltar activated his own display, showing economic data from across Alliance space. Perhaps we can demonstrate our intentions through our actions. Alliance trade has increased productivity by an average of 40% across member worlds. Medical advances shared through Kythera networks have reduced disease mortality by 60%. Educational exchanges have accelerated technological development beyond all projections. Sarah smiled at the statistics, but she knew they told only part of the story. The real transformation was cultural. Species that had been isolated and suspicious for millennia were learning to trust and cooperate. Human merchants were learning Kythera medical techniques while Kythera engineers studied human problem-solving methodologies. The challenge, Resonance of Truth observed, is that our success threatens the fundamental assumptions underlying Council authority. They rule through fear and dependency. We demonstrate that prosperity comes through cooperation. Admiral Hayes nodded grimly. Which means they have to destroy us or admit their entire system was wrong. Proud civilizations don't admit mistakes easily. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's sensor array. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, now serving as Alliance Intelligence Coordinator, appeared on the chamber's main screen with obviously disturbing news. Council fleet movements in Sector 7, he reported tersely. 300 capital ships assembling near the Hegemon cluster. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for major operations against Alliance worlds. The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed this information. 300 capital ships represented the largest military concentration since the ancient domination wars. It was a force capable of conquering entire star systems. Target assessment? Admiral Hayes asked. Unknown, but the most likely targets would be high-value Alliance assets. Advanced manufacturing worlds, major population centers, or critical transportation hubs. Sarah felt a familiar chill of recognition. The Council was preparing to demonstrate that resistance carried consequences, just as they had done countless times throughout galactic history. The question was whether the Alliance could respond effectively to such overwhelming force. We need to contact Earth Command immediately, Admiral Hayes said. If the Council is planning major operations, we'll need full military mobilization. With respect, Admiral, Veltar interjected gently, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Military confrontation plays to Council strengths. Sarah understood what her Kythera friend was suggesting. The Alliance had succeeded at Nexus Prime not through superior firepower, but through superior principles. They had made the cost of victory too high for their enemies to bear. Veltar's right, Sarah said, standing to address the chamber. We can't win a conventional war against the Council. They have superior technology, larger fleets, and 3 millennia of military experience. But, we have something they don't understand. Which is? Asked Dr. Santos. Sarah activated the chamber's display, showing communication records from across Alliance space. We have 47 species who chose to be here. Every world in the Alliance joined voluntarily because they believed in our principles. The Council rules through compulsion, we lead through inspiration. Resonance of Truth's crystalline form pulsed with harmonics that the translators rendered as excitement. You propose we use their attack as a demonstration of Alliance principles? I propose we do what humans do best, Sarah replied. We protect our family, regardless of the cost. Over the following days, the Alliance implemented what became known as the Unity Protocol. Rather than concentrating military assets to defend specific targets, Alliance worlds began massive civilian evacuation and mutual aid programs. Humans and Kythera worked together to relocate vulnerable populations, while other Alliance species contributed according to their abilities. The Harmonic Collective provided crystalline communication networks that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. The Eldari shared botanical technologies that could rapidly establish life support systems on previously uninhabitable worlds. The Zephyrians offered meditation techniques that helped refugees cope with the trauma of displacement. Most importantly, every evacuation was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Species that had never heard of the Unity Alliance watched as humans risked their lives to protect alien civilians, as Kythera healers treated wounded beings from a dozen different species, as former enemies worked together in the face of common threat. The psychological impact was devastating to Council authority. For 3,000 years, they had maintained control by convincing subject species that resistance was futile and cooperation was impossible. The Alliance was proving both assumptions wrong on a daily basis. Admiral Kenthvar, now serving as a liaison between the Council and Alliance leadership, found himself in the unprecedented position of arguing against his own government's military plans. Chancellor, he said during a private communication with Council leadership, the Alliance response to our fleet movements has created a public relations catastrophe. Every news network in the galaxy is covering their evacuation efforts. We appear to be threatening refugees and humanitarian workers. Chancellor Zekmotha's expression was grim with frustration. Admiral, the Council cannot appear weak. If we allow this alliance to expand unchallenged, other species will follow their example. Our authority will collapse. But, Chancellor, our authority is already being challenged. The question is whether we respond with wisdom or with force. What do you recommend? Admiral Kenthvar had been wrestling with this question for weeks. His military training demanded decisive action to eliminate threats to galactic order. But, his experience at Nexus Prime had taught him that the Alliance represented something new, a form of organization that might actually be superior to Council methods. I recommend we establish formal diplomatic relations with the Alliance, he said finally. Treat them as equals rather than rebels. Work with them to create a new framework for galactic governance that incorporates both Council experience and Alliance innovation. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. You're suggesting we legitimize a direct challenge to Council authority. I'm suggesting we evolve before we become extinct, Admiral Kenthvar replied bluntly. Chancellor, the galaxy is changing. We can change with it, or we can be swept aside by it. Meanwhile, on Unity Station, Sarah received a communication that would change the course of galactic history. It came from an unexpected source, Admiral Kenthvar himself, transmitted through encrypted channels with full Council authorization. Commander Chen, the Admiral's message began, Chancellor Zekmoth has authorized me to propose formal negotiations between Council leadership and Alliance representatives. The goal would be to establish a new galactic framework that recognizes both traditional authority structures and new Alliance relationships. Sarah stared at the message in amazement. After 3,000 years of unchallenged dominance, the Council was requesting negotiations with an organization that had existed for less than a year. She immediately called an emergency session of the Alliance Council. Within hours, representatives from 47 species gathered to consider the most important decision in galactic history. The question before us, Sarah addressed the Assembly, is whether we can trust the Council to negotiate in good faith, and whether we're prepared for the responsibilities that galactic leadership would entail. Ambassador Veltar spoke first. The Kythera believe that all beings are capable of growth and change. If the Council is willing to evolve, we should support that evolution. Resonance of Truth's harmonic response was more cautious. The Harmonic Collective has experienced Council rule for 2 millennia. We suggest careful evaluation of their proposals before accepting their sincerity. The debate continued for hours, with representatives sharing perspectives shaped by their species' unique histories and cultures. Some argued for immediate acceptance of negotiations, others for cautious skepticism, still others for outright rejection of any compromise with their former oppressors. Finally, Dr. Santos spoke with the practical wisdom that had guided her through the Nexus Prime crisis. The question isn't whether we trust the Council. The question is whether we're strong enough in our principles to engage with them without compromising those principles. Sarah nodded in recognition of the truth in those words. The alliance had been born from the simple belief that cooperation was superior to domination. That belief had survived its first test against Council force. Now it would face its second test against Council diplomacy. All in favor of accepting Council requests for formal negotiations? Sarah asked the Assembly. The vote was unanimous, 47 species choosing to risk everything on the belief that even the galaxy's oldest power structure could learn to embrace cooperation over control. As the meeting concluded and representatives returned to their ships and homeworlds, Sarah remained on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light, fleets were moving, species were choosing sides, and the future of galactic civilization hung in the balance. She thought about the journey that had brought them to this point, from humanity's first contact with the peaceful Kythera, through the crisis at Nexus Prime, to this moment when they stood on the threshold of redefining what galactic community could mean. "Commander," Beltar's voice came from behind her, "what are you thinking?" Sarah turned to face her friend, this alien being who had become family, who had taught humanity that intelligence and compassion could coexist, who had shown them what they could become. "I'm thinking about a conversation we had almost a year ago," Sarah replied. "You asked me how humans reconcile our capacity for war with our desire for peace. And what answer do you have now?" Sarah smiled, looking out at the stars that held billions of beings learning to see each other as family rather than strangers. "I think the answer is that we don't reconcile them. We use them both. We fight when we have to protect what we love. And we love broadly enough that eventually, everyone becomes worth protecting." The galaxy was indeed changing. And, for the first time in 3 millennia, it was changing for the better. As Unity Station continued its orbit around the diplomatic world of New Harmony, its lights visible to ships traveling throughout the sector, it served as both symbol and reality of what the galaxy could become when beings chose cooperation over conquest, love over fear, and hope over despair. The humans had been right about one thing: there was nothing more dangerous than someone who had something to protect. But they had also discovered something else: there was nothing more powerful than someone who chose to love. And love, it turned out, was the most human quality of all.